What was I gonna watch? There was another thing I wanted to watch. Oh, Professor Chung. My Professor Chung. Professor Chung. World War III has already begun.
How did you know that Trump would start a war with Iran? The simple answer is this. The United States having invaded Iran because it has no choice in the matter. If it were not to invade Iran, it would lose its empire. Its empire is based purely on U.S. dollar, the petrodollar, which is a Ponzi scheme. For the longest time, this system worked fine. But then, in February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Yeah. Okay. That was not the issue. The issue was the American response. The American response was to sanction Russia and remove Russia from the SWIFT global payment system. It also ordered the Europeans to freeze over $200 billion in Russian assets. And there's a problem. The very basis for having the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency is that it would remain politically neutral. So if this trend continues, right, if you don't do anything about Russia, Russia will take over Ukraine. And Russia...
Dude, they've elevated the game. They've elevated the game. Professor John has elevated the motherfucking game. He's got a board now. Listen, I didn't steal from him. He stole from me. He's wearing a suit. I don't have a whiteboard, but he has a suit now. Who's stealing from who?
And then what happened is the world, Europe, Middle East, Africa, India, East Asia, would look at the trading bloc and think to themselves, wow, these guys, the Russians, Iranians, and Chinese, they use gold as their medium of exchange. Gold is valuable. The Americans, on the other hand, use US dollars as the medium of exchange, which is not valuable. So am I better off with the American system or this new BRIC system? What's BRIC? It's an acronym. It stands for Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, China.
The interviewer doesn't know what BRICS is? I mean, he might, but he's probably doing it so that Professor Jung explains it.
If you're not getting your energy from the Middle East, where can you get your energy from? And there's only two answers. Either Russia or the United States. Russia is at war. What's happening is the Ukrainian drones are attacking Russian oil refineries and export hubs. So the world, in the short term, has no choice but to look to America for its energy needs. And what they do recently, he took over Venezuela, which has the world's greatest oil reserve. He's threatening Canada. He's threatening Greenland, Mexico, Colombia. If Trump controls the entire Western Hemisphere, the entire world has to beg Trump for energy and resources. And it saves both the US dollar as well as the American empire. Why did you predict that the US will lose this war with Iran? Because the American society doesn't have the political will, doesn't have manufacturing capacity, doesn't have the risk tolerance to fight this war in Iran. Basically, America wants to fight this war as quickly, as easily, and as quickly as possible.
He's so dumb, he's brilliant. I mean, he's not wrong about a lot of this stuff. He's right. America doesn't have the manufacturing base. The American population doesn't have the pain tolerance. So all of that stuff is correct. I'm just waiting for him to say something unhinged, you know? Because, like, remember, this is 9 minutes in, okay? Professor John will cook for, like, 85% of the conversation, and then the last 15%, he will say something so spectacular, so utterly unhinged, that it causes you to question everything he said leading up to that moment, where you're like, how can these two thoughts be trapped in the same mind? Nothing he's saying is, like, incredibly complicated. I've said many things that are similar, except for the last 15%.
So, is Iran saying just to the Islamic as possibly can? How they, because he's taking out the leaders. I mean, people still think that's Trump's fault, because if I become the leader, then everything will regenerate itself and will be fine. Both sort of fundamental misunderstanding. There's a lot of confusion as to how this war started. Even today, no one actually knows how this war started. But I think that Trump, given his personality.
What do you mean? We definitely know how this war started.
So, the civil concept was the force. On January 3rd of this year, Taylor Force went into Venezuela, kidnapped Maduro, and they seemed to be surrendered. So in Trump's mind, he wanted to replay the Venezuela scenario. And he didn't realize that Iran is fundamentally different from Venezuela. The short answer is, he is a reality TV star. He thinks in terms of optics. He doesn't think in terms of like geopolitical strategy. The wrong answer is that the American military has become a corrupt and insular institution that is trying to generate as much congressional funding as possible in order to fund the military-industrial complex. Did he think that he was going to bomb Iran, the people would rise up, they would elect a new government, and that would be that, and then he could control Iran? So that's exactly what he thought. So what I want to do now is show the map, okay? All right? Because I told you what he got wrong. Okay. All right. So this is a map of the
Oh,
Middle
he's
East.
cooking now. Now he's cooking. He's got a map. He's got a whiteboard, an electronic whiteboard. This dude that I hang out with, the actual anti-Semites who can't be named on Twitter anymore, he literally did a one-on-one conversation moderated by Sneeko with Dugan. It is one of the funniest things I've ever, like, I didn't even watch it, but just the fact that it exists out there is incredible. A goddamn English teacher for high schoolers in Beijing with a YouTube channel was having a conversation with, love him, hate him, and I'm not exactly a fan, one of the more consequential Russian thinkers of the 21st century, like the guy who is perhaps most responsible for the invasion of Ukraine, like Vladimir Putin's personal philosopher, okay? The founder of the ACP, Mr. Nazbal himself. Yeah, Dugan is really funny, though. He will sometimes post the funniest, dumbest shit.
And the first thing to notice about this map is the topography. What does that mean? How many mountains you have. So this is what really interesting.
Okay, never mind. Maybe he doesn't actually know what Brits is, because he just said, what does topography mean?
The Americans invaded Iraq and they won the war in about 2 weeks. And the reason why they won the war is Americans practiced something called shock and awe. The idea of shock and awe is that it is a military strategy
Shock
that believes
plus
that
A. Awe.
if you cut off the head of the snake will die. The decapitation choice. And so what they did was they went into Baghdad, seized Baghdad, and the regime collapsed, and the war was over. And they were able to do this because of the topography. If you look at a map of Iraq, it's all flat, it's all desert, meaning that if you fly in...
No, they were able to do it because the Iraqi government was already unbelievably corrupt, and they straight up bribed half of the military force, half of the generals, to stand down in the process of overtaking Baghdad and doing aerial bombing campaigns. And on top of that, they also invaded with boots on the ground, as opposed to with Iran. The topography definitely plays a role here, but the government is clearly far more stable. Iran is a sovereign state that has maintained its sovereignty for a lot longer and in a lot more resilient manner than Iraq ever could. The American campaign against Iraq was also planned for approximately a decade prior to its completion. Famously, Dick Cheney released a memo in like 1994, if I recall correctly, talking about the necessity to invade Iraq and to privatize its nationalized oil refineries, its oil and gas extraction business. It was state-owned enterprise. So there was already a lot of appetite for this. And not only that, there was also a much more competent military force that had planned out exactly how they would do it. They went in, they had a similar technique with the sanctions with Iraq as well, just like with Iran, but they went in and they bribed a bunch of generals. Like they effectively neutered the military and made sure that they had no resistance whatsoever. But perhaps most importantly, the Iranian government is actually competent, as opposed to the Iraqi government that was unbelievably corrupt, and it was very opportune for the American side to come in and just like destroy it.
Now, let's look at the topography of Iraq. And Iran is all mountainous. In fact, you can make the argument that Iran is a fortress. Okay? And so Iran can choose to fight a war of attrition. What's a war of attrition? A war of attrition is against uncle. What's that? Right, against uncle is where we don't have enough power to destroy each other. So what we try to do is we try to create pain points, leverage points.
Bro, what are you... Oh, God, I can't tell if he's, like, making this, like, insanely simplified for the people to understand what he's saying, or if he's just, like, out of his mind. Iraq is 93 million people. Iran, is 93 million people, and by land mass, it is 3.8 times the size of the country of Iraq. And the topography actually does play a major role here. It also occupies the largest coastline of the Persian Gulf. Iran also worked with the North Koreans to develop these incredibly sophisticated underground bunker systems, underground missile production facilities, underground silos, with the knowledge that Americans would inevitably come and try to blow them up. And they made these virtually impenetrable fortresses, taking advantage of the mountainous region, but also on top of that, building deep underground. And that's precisely the reason why their missile stockpiles have not diminished in the way that the American side claimed they had. There is no other country, with the exception of North Korea, that can withstand an aerial campaign from the largest, most powerful air force on the planet, the United States of America's Air Force. There's no other country that can do this. Iraq certainly didn't have any of those facilities. Iran is in a unique predicament for that reason. Iran is uniquely positioned to deal with an American aerial bombardment campaign with the knowledge that America will never actually turn around and militarily invade Iran, because it's 93 million people, and the force necessary, the troop presence necessary, would require a draft.
And so they have two major vulnerabilities, which is food and water. And they have a lot of desalination plants around the area. And so it's a desalination plant. Okay. So a desalination plant takes
Oh my God.
from the sea.
This guy is crazy. He's asking every question. I can't tell if this is like him being a good interviewer or if he's just like genuinely clueless. I mean, no disrespect. I met the guy in Qatar. He seems like a nice guy, but that's crazy. He's just like a baby. I feel like it's got to be an interviewer technique, right? No, he just understands his audience. No, it's a part of the thing. Okay.
So it's not that the Iranians have said these ships can't cross, it's just that the insurers refuse to allow these ships to cross. It is too dangerous. In terms of do you think they'd consider this before they start bombing Iran, that Iran would have some leverage in shutting down such a critical piece of water for, shipping fertilizer, energy, etc.? Do you think that they would have known this? Right, so that's a lot of people say that Trump...
Yes, they did know this, for the record. They absolutely knew this. Anyone that tells you that the Trump administration had no idea is out of their dang mind. Of course they knew about it.
That Trump is hard-headed, that he was misled by the Israelis, and there's good evidence to support this. But I want to show you something. Okay? It's called the National Defense Strategy. All right? And so this is a document that was published by the Department of War, and in it explains what the American strategy to maintain global dominance is. And in the introduction, what it says is that for too long, America has been bullied by the world. America is a nation that protects the world. Yet Europe, East Asia, take advantage of American generosity. The Europeans don't pay for their defense, and so they put all this money into welfare, into their pension system. The Chinese have been giving America a bad trade deal. The Chinese steal American technology and then use it to make products that they sell back to the Americans. So the Americans have been getting a really bad deal for decades. And President Donald Trump is going to change that by doing four things. The National Defense Strategy calls for a four-point program to put America first. The first thing that America's going to do is going to secure the Western Hemisphere. Why? Because the Western Hemisphere belongs to the United States. When you say the Western Hemisphere, give me what region is that? Okay. So this is a map. We can divide the map into the Eastern Hemisphere, okay, and the Western Hemisphere. Okay, so everything over here. Everything, including Greenland, including Canada, including Mexico, every part of this area belongs to the United States. Therefore, you cannot trade with any of these countries without American permission, without paying a tribute to the Americans. And this is why that the Americans have parked 1/3 of their naval assets in the Caribbean today.
By the way, everything he's saying here is correct. I mean, it's incorrect as far as like the American posturing, but it is correct. I've read this document. That's where they also clearly spell out that they're going to do the Don Roe doctrine, right, to dominate the Western Hemisphere. So that part is correct. What's incorrect about it is the American assessment that, like, China stole an IP to steal, to sell back shit to us, and like Europe is able to spend endless money on their welfare state because we have their protection paid for. And yes, the guy who asked what's the Western Hemisphere is, I can't tell if he's asking those questions because he sincerely doesn't know, or if he's asking for his audience. I assume he's asking for his audience.
The Chinese and the Russians.
Wait, Chinese IP theft isn't really a thing, or is it just overblown? Chinese IP theft is a handshake agreement. Do you think that since we started trading with China, that all of these companies were not aware that China was just like recreating the same technology with Chinese names? Like, do you think that they just like caught him by surprise? No, they all knew, but they wanted to take advantage of the cheap labor, and that's it. It was always a handshake agreement that we ship our jobs to China and take advantage of the low-cost labor force in China, and in exchange for that, you, China, get to recreate the same exact shit, a little bit cheaper, of course, and you can sell it. Now, of course, in 2026, this doesn't even happen any longer. Actually, roles have been reversed, where we are looking at Chinese tech and we are choosing to steal Chinese EV tech, for example, because China is now a leader in electric vehicle technology.
And the fourth one is to reinvigorate America's defense manufacturing sector. So keep it to U.S. defense industrial base. I think that's correct, yeah. All right? So what this means is that the Pentagon, a few weeks ago, went to Detroit and talked to Ford and General Motors and said, you know what, because of this war in Iran, we might need you to stop making cars and start making more munitions. How do you know this stuff? It's the Congress. They told us, yes, really, yes. This is the Pentagon. You can charge them as much as you want, and they'll pay for it. Whereas in your cars, it's for the people in the market, and they may not buy your car, right? So you're like Ford or General Motors. The best deal in the world is to go make weapons for the Pentagon to fight these wars in the Middle East that can go on for forever. So we're in a situation where, okay, look, you read the news, if you talk to a lot of people, Trump's an idiot, and this war in Iran makes no sense at all. But then, if you just read the National Defense Strategy, that is on the Department of War website, and everyone can go there and download for free and read yourself. It's a very clear roadmap of what America needs to do in order to maintain.
No, he's still an idiot, because if it still fails, just because you have a logical through line between action and reaction and you have goals, doesn't mean that it's a smart initiative. Yes, Donald Trump has a grand design for the way that he is, posturing around the world. I talked about this with the trade war that he was trying to wage against China, right? The goal there was to decouple the rest of the trade partners from China by force. It didn't succeed. Just because you have a goal doesn't mean that you're going to succeed. It's like me saying, I'm going to play in the NBA at my old age. At 34 years old, I'm going to play in the NBA. That's my goal. How am I going to achieve that? By eating donuts. Shooting a couple basketballs 3 times a day, and then eating donuts every day. Okay, I have a goal in mind. I set out on this adventure, but I didn't take the necessary steps, and I don't even have the solid fundamentals to be able to ever play in the NBA. Just because you have a goal in mind doesn't mean that it's smart to implement.
Look at all the countries that he's named over the past year. Greenland, Canada, Mexico, Venezuela, Cuba, Colombia, Nicaragua, Honduras. It's all the Western Hemisphere, right? And they're all together. Second point is to create divide and rule all around the world. So imagine a situation where in Europe, NATO fights Russia in Ukraine. In East Asia, China fights South Korea and Japan. In the Middle East, Iran fights the GCC allied with Israel. What does America do? America can now sell everyone weapons and resources and finances. This is back to World War II. But it makes them weaker as well, somebody. That's the point. Yeah. Right? And then what will happen is at $40 trillion that America has in debt will disappear. Because it'll be absorbed by the world. Right? So you can say, look, Trump's an idiot, but if you actually look at a map and how America wants this world map to play out, it makes perfect sense. So the war is going well for Trump. Well, what's going very well for Trump? Really? Yeah. So you say you predict he would lose the war. Right. What's the definition of lose the war? Losing the war means that America would send ground troops, Iran would survive the ground invasion, and this would be so politically damaging that chaos breaks out in the United States, and the U.S. ground invasion is forced to retreat, and the United States is forced to retreat.
That's not even, okay. See, this is where Professor John, this is where you lose me. What do you mean it's going well for Trump? It's going spectacularly poorly for Trump. It would have gone well for Trump if Donald Trump could have pulled off a Venezuela in Iran. That would have gone well for Trump. He would have already been in Beijing by this point in time with 2 major cards holding, 2 major points of leverage that he's holding in his hand. Control over the Strait of Hormuz, where a lot of the Chinese energy supply transits from, and also a shutting off of China's entry point into the Latin American continent, South American continent, Venezuela. He would have been able to reduce China's allegiances, or at least have leverage over China's energy partners, with the exception of Russia. And at which point, then you just basically give the entirety of Ukraine to Russia, and then he call it a day. Now you have developed sufficient leverage against the manufacturing base of the entire planet. So if they were to ever come back to you and say, hey, we're going to apply export controls on critical components that you need for defense production, for example, America could turn around and say, all right, well, we're shutting off your energy faucet. Good luck. It's almost like mutually assured destruction that way. But instead of nukes, you got nuclear options in trade. China's nuclear option in trade is its export controls. Because China is a monopoly on the refinement and procurement of all rare earth minerals, some of which are necessary for defense to build those bombs, and critical components that are necessary to even put in microchips and shit like that, which America has had leverage over China on as well with microchips and semiconductors. The rare earth export controls, rare earth mineral export controls, is a major point of leverage that China has over the United States of America. It's one that China actually utilized in the last Liberation Day tariff conversation. America needs something to counter that. And given the political control that it had over the GCC, it could at times leverage that relationship. But it's clear that China made tremendous gain in terms of developing long-standing relationships with the Gulf nation states and with the rest of OPEC Plus, that they no longer could do that. So for them, the best possible thing they could do is control the Strait of Hormuz and control Iran. Problem is, they failed. So no, the war is not going great for Trump. He's wrong. DNC Chairman Ken Martin released an incomplete and unedited version of the 2024 election autopsy. Number one, Trump's transgender-focused ad, Kamala is for they, them, is seen as highly effective and damaging. Harris did not shift position in response. Reports paint a dismal picture. Democrats have lost ground since the Obama era due to stagflation, failure to invest in states and local parties, and inability to project strength and unity. Criticizes Biden White House for not adequately preparing/supporting Kamala Harris, e.g. no polling on her like Joe Biden, poor defense against borders are labeled, false overall Democratic effort for failing to effectively define or attack Trump, relying on assumptions his negatives were baked in. Harris campaign criticized for taking too much for granted, over-focusing on suburbs and college-educated voters, neglecting rural areas, and relying on not Trump after an affirmative messaging or clear self-definition. Now, I want you to understand something. If you recall, my assessment from the start was always that this was going to be the most conservative and dog autopsy. So the very fact that they didn't even release that was unbelievably damaging. But I will admit, I did not think that part of it was because they had done a half-cocked, half-baked, possibly AI-written autopsy that was going to be so bad that there were no lessons in it whatsoever, especially after I heard Ken Martin talk over and over again about the lessons that we could take from the autopsy. Ken Martin has said that Rivera has been fired. Okay, that's cool. Martin announced his staff today in a call that Rivera is no longer working with the DNC. This is the first time they fired someone for doing a bad job, by the way, which is incredible when you think about it. Because the Democrats, Trump was right, first of all. They are the Democrats. I will say it. The Democrats is actually a correct assessment, it turns out. Maybe he still has a fastball. Maybe I was wrong, okay? Maybe his fastball is still there because they are the Democrats. Jobs where you get rewarded for failing to accomplish basic tasks. Streamers, cops, CEOs, the DNC. It is incredible how bad this is. It's genuinely worse than you would expect. They should just give the party to us right now. Honestly, it's over. Just give it up. You don't want it. You're incapable of demonstrating basic competence. You can't do this job. Make Chaz Shaker the DNC chair, probably one of the most successful operatives within the realm of Democrats. Just give it to him right now. Let's just retool the party in its entirety. You're done. You guys can go and play with the Republicans. Let's just do that. Now, of course, within the autopsy, or at least the final released version of the autopsy, as Prem Taker points, there are no mentions of Gaza or Israel or Palestine. Now, of course, if you're a wannabe DNC operative, as many people are on the internet, this means it wasn't relevant at all. They are unironically saying, oh, dude, there's no mentions of it because it wasn't relevant. Now you guys are just mad because you want it to be relevant. Oh, guess what? Now, there's two leading schools of thought here. They're competing schools of thought. Well, one is the idea that it actually was in the autopsy and then they took it out. And the other one is, yeah, of course it's not in there because these guys are morons. I think it could be either. They could have omitted this because when you look at the actual final takeaway from the autopsy, it's basically everything that the third-way neoliberals have been saying, right? And that seems a little crazy. And if that's the final takeaway from the autopsy itself, well then yeah, it was a bad one. They didn't actually do a fully fleshed out autopsy. Edinger Mentor says whoever they got to write the DNC autopsy might have legitimately used ChatGPT. Like, look at this. There are many errors. This is from the CNN report. To Martin's point about this document not being ready for prime time, it contains a lot of errors and curious inclusions, even some that are puzzling to have in a draft. For instance, it lists two separate vote percentages for North Carolina GOP gubernatorial candidate Mark Robinson, 45% and 42.7%, neither of which was his actual share, which was 40.1%. You only arrive at these numbers if the AI is hallucinating. It at one point lifts up Washington Governor Bob Ferguson as an example of a candidate who did right things before later noting that he actually underperformed Harris. It misspells the names of politicians like Republican former Governor Matt Bevin as Brevin and Democratic former New Jersey Governor John Corzine. DNC autopsy author Paul Rivera met with the pro-Palestinian group IMEU Policy Project in July 2025 and told them the war in Gaza hurt Democrats in the 2024 election, according to people familiar with the meeting. But the final report makes no mention of Israel or Gaza. Dave Weigel says DNC's position, they've published what Rivera gave them in December, nothing was taken out, and all the DNC did was add the notes, the box about how stuff is wrong or missing. So if Gaza is not in there, it's because Rivera's report didn't include it. So either Rivera purposely did not look at Gaza or Palestine at all in the autopsy, either because someone directed him not to look at Palestine or Gaza or Israel at all, which is insane. Because you're supposed to cover every angle, like even if it's irrelevant, which is the argument that like the Israel firsters in the Democratic Party are going to try to say, oh, it's because it was irrelevant. Stupid. It was irrelevant. This confirms my priors. They didn't factor in Gaza because it was irrelevant. See? All you guys are obsessed with Israel. That's what they're going to say, right? There were a million polls leading up to the election that showed that it was significant. And even if it was insignificant, the autopsy should show that it was insignificant. The idea that a full spectrum coverage on what went wrong is not going to feature some of the things that were irrelevant and openly say that it was irrelevant is insane. If it's irrelevant, it should be in the autopsy, as Gaza was not relevant to the equation at all. In any case, centrists, of course, have welcomed this revelation. It's just crazy because the Democrats always find a way to make the centrists look good somehow. Well, internally. Externally, centrists are despised, reviled, everybody hates them. But internally within the party, they're always right. It's just so crazy. They always massage the numbers to figure out a way where the centrists' priors were always the correct one, you know? They just did not lean hard enough to the moderate pivot. They didn't lean hard enough to be moderates, it seems. Welcome PAC, which promotes centrist Democrats, says the DNC autopsy is proof that the party needs to moderate. Why didn't I think of that? Oh my God. I'm a centrist. And of course, once again, the centrist DNC's autopsy that was absolutely dark and everybody hates it actually proves my previous point that you had to be more centrist. True communism has never been tried. True centrism has never been tried. True centrism has never been tried. We needed more Liz Cheney, not less. You guys are stupid. Virtually every single factor that was unbelievably important are not mentioned in the report at all. Funny how that goes. How interesting. Gaza is irrelevant to the equation. Biden's age is irrelevant to the equation. And inflation is irrelevant to the equation. Well, if that's what your argument is, then I guess there's nothing wrong with what the Democrats did, right? I mean, this is just a report that once again proves that Democrats did everything right and they still got indicted, you know? I did everything right and they indicted me. It turns out the Democrats did pretty much everything right, except they did not go far right enough. It turns out the only way the Democrats could have done better, could have performed better, is if they pivoted to the center a little bit harder. It's really funny that centrist PAC, like Welcome PAC, are pointing to this as a spectacular victory when the DNC chair himself is like, this is dog It's poo-poo. It's unbelievably embarrassing. I fired the guy who put it together. I hid it for 2 years out of shame, and I'm probably going to be fired from my position. And centrists are like, oh, this is perfect. This actually shows that we were right all along. Incredible. Third Way also posted and deleted a meme about the autopsy as well. Third Way put out a statement claiming the long-awaited DNC autopsy proved their world to be correct, only to delete it after it was pointed out their document they claimed was proof of their analysis was riddled with basic factual errors and was woefully incomplete. Third Way President John Cowan on the DNC autopsy. No wonder the chronically online, highly educated, left-leaning team at the DNC wanted to bury this report. The autopsy draft released today validates the case we've been making post-2024 and are making again today as we gather over 150 Nevada Democrats to chart the party's future. Democrats must be able to win the middle anytime, anywhere, and they can do that only with a combative centrism that rejects identity politics, reclaims the vital center, and positions the party as fighters on the economic issues that matter most to voters. As the New York Times poll shows, even a majority of Democrats want the party to move center and not left, and this report echoes that sentiment. For Democrats who want the win, this report should be case closed. They had to delete it because everyone was like, dog, this report sucks. What the are you talking about? You're such a goddamn idiot. But again, it doesn't matter because you can be a idiot as long as you're an idiot for rich people. As long as you're a propagandist for rich people, your position is usually going to be fine. Your station will not be in jeopardy. Another example of this, of course, is Barry Weiss. Barry Weiss is an unbelievably incompetent brown-noser, but because she's a brown-noser for the right billionaires, her station is usually fine, right? I mean, now they're talking at CBS because of her unbelievable incompetence that maybe they should switch her around a little bit, but she's always going to have a career. The other point that they're trying to hastily slap together is this notion that the New York Times Siena poll also confirms their priors. But it's something that a lot of people don't understand. Voters identify free healthcare and other left economic populist policies as moderate. That's the problem. These guys think when the average American says, let's move to the center, let's move the Democratic Party to the center, they actually mean stop talking about trans stuff all the time, which is what they think is going on, which is not going on because the only reason why the Democrats are defined by that is, and this is literally absolutely a major part of the Kamala Harris failure is because they are defined by their enemy. Democrats are defined by the Republicans because they don't get to dictate the terms of their own party. They don't get to dictate who they are. They don't get to show the Americans who they are with clear-cut, definable policies. That's why I always ask every candidate that I have to, do the Zoran method. Give me 5 policies that you want to be defined by. Anyone that does not recognize that is either lying, being paid to lie, or is a unbelievable dumbass. I'm sorry. It's very clear. You look at, approvals for certain politicians like Zoran Mamdani, Bernie Sanders. These people are in the hard left or the hardest of left. Why do they have better approvals than, Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez? Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez or Josh Gottheimer are the perfect Democrats, right? From the perspective of the Democratic Party, the problem solvers caucus. Those are the blue dog Democrats are supposed to be the best Democrats. If you were to look at Twitter and get your notes off of DNC consultants and also those who LARP as DNC consultants for free on election Twitter, Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez is the best Democrat possible. She's the best, right? And so is Josh Gottheimer. So why are they not at the forefront? Why is Abigail Spanberger not one of the best Democrats out there? Why is her popularity not skyrocketing? Why is that the case? Perhaps because what consultants frame as centrism is not the same as what the average voter perceives as being closer to, a moderate politician. What voters look at in terms of moving to the center is free healthcare, free college education. Voters, American voters, by and large, consider those policies to be moderate policies. They think it's crazy that we don't have that. And I've been trying to hammer this point across over and over again. No one in the United States of America thinks the most moderate politician is a politician that chooses to be center-left to, quote-unquote, far left only on social issues and totally right-wing when it comes to economic issues. That's not a real person. That is probably the least popular type of politician you could arrive at. The most popular politician, on the other hand, is one that actually pushes a broad left-wing agenda when it comes to the economy and puts that at the forefront of their messaging, the forefront of their campaign, the forefront of their legislative agenda. All of the other stuff, whether you're socially progressive or socially moderate or socially reactionary, that stuff is secondary. What people care about is what you're going to do for them, okay? And once again, as I've said over and over again, we do not have to compromise on trans issues at all. We do not have to compromise on trans issues at all because if you just give people something to vote for rather than constantly vote against the Republicans, then you don't have to talk about the trans at all. Then you look silly. Your opposition looks silly. If you're like, hey, I am going to improve your life. I'm going to improve your life. I'm going to fight to improve your life no matter what. That is my primary focus, is my primary purpose. That's all I want to do is improve your mother life, and here are the ways I'm going to do that. We're going to fix public transit in this country. We're going to do high-speed rail in this country. We're going to do, jobs guarantee, federal jobs guarantee. We're going to do social housing. We're going to do free healthcare, free college education. When you say stuff like that, when you put that at the forefront of your campaign, and then your opposition turns around and goes, but what about trans people? What about trans people? You look stupid. Your opposition looks unbelievably childish and stupid. It's that simple. This is what your opposition looks like. I said, now imagine if the other side is offering Medicare for all, arms embargo and sanctions on Israel, a federal jobs guarantee, social housing projects, and high-speed rail. Like, imagine one party is saying, we are the Medicare for all party. We're going to give you free healthcare. We're going to give you free college education. We're going to actually fix the housing market. We're going to just build social housing, and we're going to do good labor unionized government-backed jobs to build those houses. Same with the railroads, all this. And then this is what the Republicans are focused on.
Candidate is Ken Paxton. I think he'll win. I think probably he'll win very substantially. And I think he'll go on to defeat a very defective candidate, a candidate that believes in 6 genders, and he takes hits to Jesus Christ, and he's wearing a mask 6 months ago, whereas anybody wearing a mask 6 months ago doesn't get it.
I mean, this is silly. The average American voter might be a little bit reactionary. The average American cultist might actually hear this and go, 6 genders, okay, that seems good for me. There is a much smaller market for people who demand this, as opposed to people who demand material improvements in their lives. I feel like nothing I'm saying is shocking. I don't think anything I'm saying is even ideological. I don't think anything I'm saying is like reinventing the wheel in any way, shape, or form. I'm literally saying, if you promise to fix people's immediate material problems that plague them on a daily basis with clear-cut, well-defined policies, universal policies that are easy to understand, easy to identify, and your opposition is talking about how you want, 35 genders and to snip people's penises or whatever, they're going to look gross and weird and strange. You're going to look competent. But the Democrats will never do that because they know that if they do that, then corporations that benefit from both parties' inability to address these issues and corporations that make money off of the economic struggles that plague your life, corporations in the private healthcare industry, for example, those guys will lose profits and they'll stop giving money to the Democrats. They'll stop hiring the children of elected representatives in the Democratic Party into high-paying jobs. It's not that confusing. It's not that complicated. The guy that Martin hired to do the autopsy up so bad and was still working for the DNC months later, he just got fired. For the record, the guy that was hired to do the autopsy was so spectacularly bad, and yet he was still working at the DNC, because this is another thing that I always talk about. Democrats love rewarding failure. Jamie Harrison, great example. Diligent fundraiser, fundraised a ton of money against Lindsey Graham, failed spectacularly, and the DNC was like, you're our guy, you should head it. And it turns out Ken Martin is also kind of a failure too, a little bit. Now that Amy McGrath, 3-time loser in Kentucky, is free because she lost the primaries to Charles Booker in Kentucky, maybe we'll put Amy McGrath in charge. Maybe we'll put Amy McGrath in charge. It, dude. It's just ridiculous. Oh, by the way, this was awesome. Conclusions. Perfect metaphor for an institutional Democratic Party that seems unwilling to even face the moment. Disclaimer, this document reflects the views of the author. Conclusion. This section was not provided by the author. Not too many people here on Al Gore's internet are also the lead author of a sprawling 2024 autopsy-like report. Since the good Lord blessed me with this opportunity, she has also chosen to bless me with this. The funniest thing I've ever seen in my life, actual raffling. Oh my God. According to another source on the call, Martin didn't refuse to take questions. Nobody asked one. Wait, what? Ken Martin just held a call for all DNC members. According to a person on the call, Martin essentially just read his public statement on the autopsy and then refused to take any questions. Nobody asked for questions. This is why I say these guys are unfathomably weak. This yields opportunity. This is why I keep repeating over and over again that this party is dying. The Democratic Party is unbelievably weak, and that's a good thing for us. if your goal is to make necessary changes in the United States of America, it's basically an opportunity. It's like you have a friend who's really into cars, and he has an incredible car that you want. He's your best friend, but he can't drive it any longer. He had a freak accident, so he can't drive cars any longer. You can just take the car now, okay? You can just be like, hey, let me take this off of you. I'll take this car off of you real cheap, okay? You give me a good deal on this. You got a DUI. Maybe I'll let you drive it every now and then in the parking lot. That's the way I see it. I see opportunity. So it's a waste not to use this opportunity, this moment.
That goes beyond just the typical Democratic voting demographic. Will they be able to re-secure some of those voters? I think that's part of what Democratic leadership here on the Hill has been betting on, and that could serve as somewhat of a roadmap heading into 2020.
At long last, the 2024 DNC
There's our autopsy report from the DNC from 2024, and we know you'll bring us more highlights as you get them.
It makes total sense why incompetent fascist Republicans keep winning in this goddamn country with objectively the most evil, openly evil policies. Because it's not like the Republicans are running around being like, we have some really good ideas on how to fix this country. They are just open. They're open about it. They're like, no, we hate you. We want to melt the poor. We want to kill a lot of immigrants in the process, or anyone and everyone that we have considered to be bad because they're brown. Like, we have all the worst ideas, and people still go, you know what, I'm going to vote for this guy. And if you're wondering why that's the case, if you're like, how is that possible? How the Democrats still losing to this? Well, here you have it. It's because the party is unbelievably incompetent. They don't want to win. They don't care about winning. They don't care about defeating the Republicans. It's that simple. They just want to sit around and collect their money. That's it. The DNC is a horrible institution. It is an institution that has bred so much failure. And there are a lot of people who are no longer falling for the bullshit that this liberal institution has presented. Self-identifying liberals who are demanding more. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to show them that there is a different type of politics, a different way of understanding the world, one that actually focuses on class, one that actually wants to improve their lives. But instead of using this as an opportunity to foment class consciousness amongst the masses, most of the people just want to chirp in Twitch streams. They want to chirp on Twitter. They don't want to actually go out and talk to people. It's frustrating. All they want to do is yell at the people who do that. All they want to do is yell at the DSA. It's always about criticizing the different methods of organizing that other people are using. It's never about doing the work. And I don't understand where this comes from. Sometimes you just got to shut the up and let other people cook, and you cook in the way that you want to cook, okay? You do it. If it works, I'll work with you every single time. People get real mad when I say, build the Vanguard King and I'll be there for you. And they get real upset. They're like, wow, this is so dismissive. No, man, I'm being sincere when I say that. What makes you think if there was currently an active Marxist-Leninist Vanguard Party, or an active, genuine, successful, impactful Vanguard out there, that I wouldn't work with them? It's very strange. If you just assume that the masses are gone and it's a foregone conclusion, Trump heads to China for high-stakes summit. Let's keep going.
U.S. in an awful position when it comes to China. As you mentioned, President Trump used today.
Living the dream, by the way. You hate to see a different queen thrive. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm not glad that happened to you. It should have happened to me instead. That's how I feel about this, and I'm going to be open about it. I'm going to be honest about it. Because he was talking about how wonderful of a show that the Chinese put on every time the Americans get there, and I was thinking in my head, I'm like, you don't even deserve it. You don't even deserve it. You don't deserve the Chinese showmanship, okay? They're going to roll out the goddamn red carpet. You don't deserve it at all.
For a high-stakes visit with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, and according to reports, China could play a role in helping end the conflict if it gets concessions from the U.S.
As President Trump prepares to depart for Beijing for this year's most consequential bilateral summit, the Iran war will loom large. Trump had postponed the trip back in March, expecting the conflict to be over by the time he met with President Xi.
Nope. Nope. Didn't happen.
It's following him to China.
Borders have not been open. You as a reader need access. And this access is in Beijing.
Chinese analyst Henry Wang says Beijing has leveraged over Iran as its largest trading partner. He believes Xi could provide a much-needed off-ramp for Trump, but it's likely to come at a price. Xi wants a reduction in tariffs, removal of export controls on advanced semiconductors, and sanctions lifted. But what he wants most is Taiwan. And that would involve the US changing its position on the self-governed island and reducing its decades of military support. It's almost 9 years since Trump was last in China, and a lot has changed. This country of 1.4 billion people has become a manufacturing powerhouse, as we witnessed last week, when we visited a dark factory operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, run by AI and robots. It's a very different landscape, and Trump is no longer holding all the cards.
President Trump leaves today for Beijing for a high-stakes summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and the war with Iran is over. Again, it should have been me!
Sorry. I don't know what came over me. He's going to have the best food. He's going to have the best food. He's not even going to like it. He's going to be like, why is there no McDonald's? Chinese McDonald's, not good enough by my American standards. It's just annoying. He's going to sit in a high-speed rail, or I think Xi Jinping has like a special train that they roll out for. It's a high-speed rail that they roll out for like foreign dignitaries, and he's going to get in that and be like, I don't want to bring this to America. I will never bring this to America. I hate it. Oh, you know what the best method of travel is? A Ford F-450.
Foreshadowing and perhaps influencing what would have been the major issues at play, trade tensions and China's designs on Taiwan. The president says the ceasefire with Iran is on, quote, life support. The Strait of Hormuz remains essentially closed, and Iran has not conceded to the president's demands for peace. Let's get like a CNN.
Just to be closer to Xi Jinping, I'd become president of the United States. I thought. Just for that goal.
In a stream at the White House, this trip has been on the calendar, actually moved, but for some time, a lot of desires to get things done here, but what does it play next?
Yeah, look, I think initially the White House, John, really wanted this to be a visit about trade and the economy, and also, almost a watershed moment for these two leaders of these superpower economies, but so much of it is being now overshadowed by the war in Iran and also this long-standing dispute over Taiwan. But I do want to get into a little bit about what the White House wants this to be about. We know, of course, that really this bruising tariff fight between the U.S. and China has really dominated much of last year. But President Trump and Chinese Xi Jinping did agree to almost like this fragile truce.
We need BYD. I think BYDs are, they're all right. I want a Yangwang. I want the jumping car, the supercar, the young one, what is it, U9? Oof. Oh, baby. I want a Huawei phone. Oh, that'd be so sick. Huawei!
Fall and the White
Wait, Yangwang and his BYD? Wait, which one is the one that I like? Oh, it is the Yangwang. It is BYD. Oh, my God. Yeah, no, I was thinking of the U9. Not the Xiaomi SE7. I was thinking of the U9, bro. Look at the gap. Where are you jumping to? Bro, I need this, okay? You want to know why I need this? I need this more than anyone else. If you've ever driven in Los Angeles, California, you know this is an absolute necessity. This is an absolute necessity for all the potholes. They never fix these goddamn roads, okay? And we have literally the best weather, and there's still unbelievable amounts of potholes.
haggling over potential Chinese purchases of American products that include commercial jetliners and soybeans, and also proposal for a joint board of trade that would bring government oversight to a lot of the commerce between these two countries. We're also going to expect, of course, to talk about tariffs and how to adjust them as they remain at a very high level. But again, a lot of this is also going to be dominated by what is happening in Iran. I'd remind you that China has seen a lot of high-profile leaders come to the country recently. We saw the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met with his Chinese counterpart last week. Russian President Vladimir Putin is expected to travel to the country just days after President Trump departs. So a lot that is going on here for global geopolitics as well. And I think when it comes down to the Iran war, what's going to be very interesting is I spoke with a lot of my sources here at the White House yesterday about the latest of, the president saying that this war, or the ceasefire rather, is on life support. I mean, it'll be interesting to see whether or not the president is going to ask for Xi Jinping to almost aid in bringing the Iranians to the table. We know that.
American media, words you never want to hear coming from the mouths of the State Department-backed American media. President Donald Trump is asking for aid from Xi Jinping. Hello, I really f***ed up this time. Please help me.
The Chinese have been very close in communicating with the Iranians throughout this entire process. So that could be another key part of this. We're just going to have to see. I am told as well that the president, who in recent days has been contemplating moving back to major combat operations with Iran, more than he has so in weeks, he is not expected to make a decision on how to proceed with the Iran war before departing for China. So a lot at stake here.
And an Iranian spokesman and advisor to the supreme leader apparently trolling the president ahead of that Beijing trip, saying, and I quote here, Mr. Trump never imagined that by taking advantage of Iran's current calm, you will be able to enter Beijing triumphantly. What are you hearing from the White House about what is expected from this Beijing trip and how Iran might sort of feed into the narrative at this point?
Well, according to an administration official this weekend, they are going to bring pressure on Beijing when it comes to the war. Of course, they could serve as an effective interlocutor with the Iranians to try to drive them to the table. And a former senior official said that it is almost inevitable that Trump will be asking Xi Jinping for help on next steps. Now, of course, this is likely to overshadow a lot of this trip. Trump, of course, wanted this conflict to be wrapped up already before he went on this trip. He already had to postpone it once due to the war. Another former official said this is...
All right, I've seen enough. Roll the tape!
Was that Beijing?
This is still, to this day, the most aura-inducing photo that any global leader alive has taken. Where's your aura? I got no aura, man. I'm sitting at home wearing a suit, covering people that don't deserve to shake Xi Jinping's hand from afar, thousands of miles away, as I'm duking it out with some of the dumbest ops of all time, like Majority Dems.
There's an old saying that only Nixon could go to China. But
Chuck Schumer on President Trump's visit to China. I think the Democrats are going to drop the ball on this China stuff, by the way, which is expected.
soon they'll say only Trump could sell out to China. Xi Jinping has Donald Trump salivating at the prospect of $1 trillion Chinese investment. In America, that would threaten America's supply chain, threaten economic independence, threaten national security. Strengthen China at the expense of American strength. Donald Trump wants to deal with China so badly.
Dude, this is bad politics and bad policy, which is expected from the Democrats, as always. It's bad policy because it's objectively good to normalize relations with China instead of posturing like we're going to go and do war with a country that is responsible for 30% of all of our trade. And it's bad politics because you look like you're at odds with Donald Trump bringing in like $1 trillion investment into the country. What happens if there is a Chinese factory that opens up? The best possible way to communicate here is I don't think Donald Trump is competent enough. He has very clearly made China out to be this ultimate villain, And therefore, I don't think that Donald Trump is going into this deal with any leverage, and he would have had a lot more leverage if we just continued with the JCPOA, for example. If the real fear here was Iran having nukes, which we know wasn't a real fear at all, wasn't a sincere fear at all, according to Donald Trump's very own intelligence community assessment, that waging diplomacy rather than war would have been the best possible outcome. Surprisingly, many Democrats are even more hawkish on China than Trump. I mean, this makes sense. This makes sense. The ban of Chinese cars, a demand for a ban of Chinese cars is that's not bad politics. Let's be real. That makes sense. If Chinese manufacturing was happening on U.S. soil, it would destroy Ford. It would be over. I mean, Jim Farley has openly admitted that. He went to China. He literally has one of the only Chinese cars that he uses as his daily driver, by the way, which he openly admits is an incredible ride. And he straight up said, I went to China, I saw their capabilities. If Chinese cars come to U.S. soil, it's over for Ford. There will be no more Ford. So yeah, if you care about one of the only remaining American manufacturing sectors that isn't building baby murder machines, the automobile industry, then yeah, you have to do trade protectionism like that.
He could sell out on American manufacturing. He could sell out on chips. He could sell out on Taiwan, which produces many of these chips. He could sell out on AI and on any number of great issues that will determine who dominates the 21st century. Right now, again, to get his photo in the newspapers and prize won't work. To raise his very low poll numbers, he's going to sell out to China. We can't let Trump willingly give China our superior American technology, or allow him to serve Taiwan to the Chinese Communist Party on a silver platter, just so he can get the satisfaction of saying he made a deal.
I just don't think Democrats should ever come across like the more militant party, because it just doesn't give them any benefit whatsoever. The base doesn't care about it. The base doesn't want it. And the broader electorate never will see you as the more militant party. It's unbelievably stupid. It's the same on immigration. You should never be we're going to be marginally less racist but still racist party when it comes to immigration. It's so stupid. Why are you a protectionist? Buddy, I'm a socialist. What do you mean? If you have trade to protect, it's understandable to engage in a little bit of trade protectionism. So I know. I mean, as a consumer, I would love for a Chinese electric vehicle. But, as an American citizen who cares about the hundreds of thousands of jobs that would go away if there was no automobile manufacturing, of course I care a little bit about trade protectionism. Yes, why do you hate us? You don't own Ford stock? It doesn't matter. It's not about owning Ford stock. I also have the capacity to purchase whatever platinum healthcare coverage I want to purchase for myself, but I still want Medicare for all, right? It's called empathy.
And look, I think the Chinese will make a few purchases to please Trump. It's quite easy for them to do.
Yeah, everyone knows the game is up, by the way. It's not even, I feel like I'm not even capable of offering unique analysis right now, because the situation is so obvious that, like, you're hearing Western press basically have similar takes to myself. Normally, there's usually some significant disagreements, some big differences in the way that Western press approaches the issue of China, and someone like myself will approach the issue of China, and it's kind of glaringly obvious that Trump has no leverage coming into this meeting, and Xi Jinping is going to offer some niceties along the way, maybe some investment, maybe like some factories that will open, and that's it. And America is probably going to cave on a lot of stuff with regards to Taiwan. The real unique thing here is normally Western media would find a way to talk about this as like talk about this as though it's like unbelievably sinister. They're going to offer some benefits, but then they're going to try to do it Chinese style. Ooh, they're going to wage war somehow, and it's interesting that they've just given up.
They'll buy some soybeans, they'll buy some Boeing aircraft, but economically, I think the real biggie between them is the rare earth, right? China dominates it, the US needs it.
And I think Trump would like a bit more guarantee that they'll be able to access those crucial materials. And look, it's a guarantee that I don't think China will necessarily give.
Do you hear this? Do you know how insane it is to hear this kind of commentary from Western press? For the last decade, when I said anything similar to this, where I just any sort of accurate reporting on what China was intending to do and what America was trying to get out of whatever deal with China, you would get hit with a beam of, oh my God, you love China so much, you're a China glazer, you're a China dick rider, you hate America, you want America to die. Bro, you were saying this a month ago? Of course I was saying this a month ago, because PBS, Piker Broadcasting News Service, is sponsored by you, the people, and it's always for you, the people. PBS, for tomorrow's news today.
So there's this extremely popular phrase doing the rounds on Chinese social media at the moment. The phrase is 川建国. It literally translates as Trump nation builder.
川建国，
你们都以为川建国发起关税战？
特朗普起的名字真的恰如其分，川建国。
But here's the catch. It doesn't mean that Trump is building up his own nation. What it implies is that his actions are allowing China to increase its national standing. The Chinese people are trolling Donald Trump big time. But do they have a point?
Piker Broadcasting Service. Oh my God. I'm going to glaze myself again. Piker Broadcasting Service. We've been saying this for literally the past 2 years. For the past 2 years. For the past few years. Western media is now saying this. It's incredible. Oh my God.
And so a tit-for-tat escalation followed, which saw tariffs at their height of over 125%.
China's retaliation squeezed Donald Trump. So did the U.S. Supreme Court when it skewed his tariff policy. Today, U.S.-China tariffs are down on both sides. America has felt the pain of a trade war, and Trump isn't delivering on.
How many people came to me during Liberation Day? How many hogs came in here and tried to say, oh yeah, this is base. Oh Hassan, you're just pro-China, you don't understand. Sometimes I think about this, but it's like I had to duke it out with Asmongold fans while I was literally saying exactly what was going to happen, which now, Western press is also covering.
The Bund in Shanghai is one of the best places to come if you want to understand just how far China's economy has come. On the one side, European built at a time of weakness and colonial domination, and on the other, this glassy tribute to China's modern, ultra-rapid economic growth. But there's no doubt, Trump's trade war has caused real pain here. The economy is reliant on exports, and many of them were to the US. And then there are other problems: debt, deflation, a limping property market, high youth unemployment. But interestingly,
the limping property market is irrelevant. It's immaterial. It doesn't matter. But the only real problem that they point to here is actually youth unemployment. That is a genuine issue. And this also speaks to one of China's, I would say, most interesting aspects of governance. They don't do they do very little welfare, right? Like, they don't have any interest in welfare whatsoever. And they have a lot of youth unemployment right now. And people are just moving back into their smaller towns with no real job prospects whatsoever. So that is a huge issue. No, the U.S. is not worse. That's how little welfare plays a role in Chinese governance.
none of this necessarily weakens Xi Jinping's hand at the negotiation table. China is pursuing new markets, and it has a far higher tolerance for pain. Rising prices won't affect him at the ballot box.
Dude, it is kind of funny when they're covering this stuff, and on the one hand they're like, well, you know, China has some problems too, but also they don't have like a normal election system, obviously, in the same way that we do in the United States of America, so like that's a little bit advantageous when you think about it. And it's like they are actively trying to make it seem like there is any sort of equivalence, any sort of parity in who is suffering between these two adversaries. And they just cannot, because especially when it comes to foreign policy maneuvers, foreign policy engineering, and you know, global stability, there is no equivalence between China and Trump. China straight up has been able to present themselves as a real successor of Western liberalism and the grand design for international trade, as opposed to Donald Trump, who is only representing chaos in the global stage.
This hotel has a really important place in the history of the US-China relationship. It was the place where, in 1972, President Nixon came. He met with the then Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai, and they signed what's known as the Shanghai Communique. It was, in essence, the starting point of their modern geopolitical relationship. And it marked a moment where China was coming out of a period of international isolation. How strikingly different things are today.
By the way, that's why they love Nixon and also Kissinger in China. The only country where it's totally valid to actually put respect on Henry Kissinger's name is China, because, they are the reason why the UN got the PRC and flipped the script on the ROC, Republic of China, and recognized PRC as the true China, which was already the case. But I wonder how long America could have held out without that recognition. Like, I wonder how long it would have taken, or how different things could have been if Nixon didn't do that. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if China would look like, or foreign policy, or like Chinese foreign policy would resemble North Korea foreign policy.
Trump's military adventures also give China the opportunity to push the stable superpower narrative, but it does shed light on China.
I'm sorry, is that a narrative, or is that just abject reality? At some point, we got to come to terms with that, right? Because, like, you're not American, you're British. From your perspective, I know the immediate inclination is like, we got to dick ride America, but
remember too, China doesn't mind one bit the US being distracted and depleted elsewhere. It has its eyes on Taiwan, the self-governing democracy it has sworn to retake by force.
oh my God. This lady is definitely a liberal. China should deport her. Okay, shut the f*** up, dude. Don't behave like Chinese hogs. Okay, you can't be a right-winger for China. Okay, that's crazy. Support her. You know what you behave like when you do that? It's gonna hurt to hear this, but you sound like Asmongold fans who are European, who LARP as MAGA.
Ilhan Omar, oh my God. Like, the day that she gets deported, I will probably do like a 12-hour stream. I will be so happy.
I know it hurts to have a mirror reflected back at you, but it's kind of true. Now, obviously, the counter here is, well, some dicks are worth riding, right? LeBron.
Could Taiwan count on Donald Trump to come to its defense? Some aren't so sure. On the face of it, his position is the same as his predecessor, strategic ambiguity. But unlike presidents before him, who've made it...
America can't even defend its own bases in the Persian Gulf. What makes you think they are going to be able to militarily defend Taiwan? I'm sorry. They literally pulled out the THAAD missile launchers from Korea and panic shipped them to Israel. What are we talking about? It's over. It's done. It's done. What we need to do now is recognize that it's done and try to chart a different path forward, one that doesn't engage our major foreign adversary militarily, but one that actually tries to create stability in the world.
Propaganda has been so central to the growth and the survival of the Chinese Communist.
Oh my God. Wait, don't tell me. They have a rose-colored view of their complex history. What's next? Do they also do that in their museums? What? You're telling me for the first time, China, the only country that does this. Wow, I can't believe it. Good thing we don't do that. Oh, yeah, we have slavers carved in the mountains that were native ground.
In this museum,
Tell the Jogasan, a CIA agent and a KGB agent get together in a Berlin cafe. They're communicating for the first time. The CIA agent tells the KGB agent, hey, I saw your latest communique. I must say, that's some excellent propaganda. The KGB agent turns around and says, thank you. Right back at you. You also have some excellent propaganda. CIA agent says, what propaganda? End joke. This isn't even a funny joke. Did I f up the joke? I thought I delivered it. right? It's like barely a joke is this true. Well, those are the best jokes.
In all of its varied glory. But you get a real sense being here of just how opposing the two systems are. For China, the party's ultimate control of society, of the narrative, is the reason for its success. It sees democracy as a flawed, chaotic, divisive, even hampering system. And the two men at the top, well, they could hardly be more different.
I mean, I like democracy. I like theoretical democracy. I'm a big champion of it. But the current formation of democracy that we have in Western liberal capitalist nations is objectively becoming a failure, and one might even say it was always a complex process that was slated for inevitable defeat. The whole point of this system is that we arrive at the best possible outcomes for the people. If you're not arriving at the best possible outcomes for the people, then it doesn't matter if you're under a monarchy or under a dictatorship. The reason why we don't like monarchies and dictatorships is because they have a much higher likelihood of creating chaos, death, and destruction, and harming people's material conditions instead of improving them. That's the reason why we don't like those systems. That's the reason why we are critical of those systems. There's no intrinsic good to any mode of governance beyond what it can do to people. And part of the reason why I think a lot more people are totally on board with whatever the going on in China nowadays is not necessarily just because China has developed tremendously and they have all the bells and whistles, the RGB cities, all this stuff, but also because the American or the Western system rather is demonstrably collapsing. And it's collapsing in a way where the contradictions are worsening and people can feel it, people can experience it. And it causes people to go, what are we doing here? What's going on? Why are we existing under this system? It doesn't work. And that can be very dangerous. That can be very dangerous because that kind of illiberalism, that kind of illiberal attitude is what leads to fascism. And that's what we're seeing in America right now with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is taking one of the two major liberal parties and turning it into an illiberal fascist party. Tulsi Gabbard is resigning as the Director of National Intelligence. Now, a couple things I do want to point out. Again, alongside Joe Kent, these are two of the highest profile resignations that have taken place in this administration and in really any administration, right? I mean, obviously, there's been high-profile resignations in the past throughout American history. I'm sure there's been something similar to this in the past, but it certainly didn't take place in the Biden administration. And I do think it's important. I do think it's important to recognize that. I suspect that there was probably some inside pressure as well. I don't know if Tulsi Gabbard was like, I'm falling on my sword because I'm, calling out this administration's actions against Iran. Now, here's what's going on. Is this a resignation born out of a principled commitment to the anti-war movement, or is this basically a firing by a different name? And if it is a firing by a different name, is it still because Tulsi Gabbard took a principled stance at times, or would potentially present a threat to what the administration is trying to communicate to the broader public? Because Tulsi Gabbard famously is the anti-Iran, anti-war hawk. We should only advance wars that are beneficial for us. Not exactly an anti-imperialist, mind you, but the type of person, kind of not dissimilar to Marjorie Taylor Greene, that says we should actually only engage in wars that are good and no wars that are bad. I have a suspicion that she was forced out. But even though she was forced out, my suspicion is she was forced out because internally she might have been causing a little bit of a fuss, causing a little bit of responsible for some chaotic moments internally. I could see that being part of the problem. All right, but let's take a look at what CNN is saying right now. Hold on, I'm getting some text.
Tulsi Gabbard is resigning after about 15 months in the role of the Director of National Intelligence.
Yeah, we're going to get straight to the White House and bring in Kevin Liptak with the latest. What are we hearing right now?
Yeah, and this is a significant departure. We do now understand that Tulsi Gabbard has informed President Trump of her decision to resign from the administration. And what she is telling associates is that she is stepping down because her husband is confronting a rare form of cancer. And so that is her rationale for stepping back from this very, very critical role at a very critical moment as the U.S. Remains at war with Iran.
She contradicted the admin early on in her hearing on Venezuela and Iran, and they've supposedly kept their distance from any actual decision-making most of the term. Yeah, I think that they saw her as like a little bit of a loose cannon, and I suspect that part of the reason why Donald Trump had her on board is because he was building this he was building this anti-war coalition, this fake anti-war coalition, and for some that voted for him, just like he brought in RFK Jr., he brought in Tulsi Gabbard as well to make it seem as though he was going to be an anti-war guy, right? An anti-war president.
No new wars. We don't need the wars. Foreign lands, countries you've never heard of, countries that don't even want us there. We will keep America out of foolish, stupid, ridiculous foreign wars.
Now, of course, we know that he never was going to be an anti-war president, but maybe he thought that she would play ball when she was in office, or when she was in service, rather. And it turns out she had her own perspective. So I suspect that there were a couple times where she directly contradicted the president, and I assume that was enough for Trump once he realized the base is not punishing him for not being anti-war at all. He was just like, all right, this is just dead weight.
Ways restarting the bombing campaign inside that country. This will be a significant departure for the administration. And so Tulsi Gabbard telling the president today that she does plan to resign and that she's stepping aside for this ultimately very personal reason, which is her husband's health. Now, that being said, this has been quite a tumultuous tenure, I think, for Tulsi Gabbard over the course of this second Trump administration. There had been clear points throughout the last year and a half when she did seem to diverge with what the president was trying to do. You know, she came to this job with a very clear anti-war background. You know, she herself is a veteran. She talked before she was in this job when she was a congresswoman from Hawaii about not starting foreign wars, specifically about not starting war.
Iran just said the deal was not closed. Also, Israel said that Iran is planning a secret drone strike on Israel. All signs point to a resumption of hostilities with Gabbard resigning. Yeah, I think Donald Trump is doing a classic move that we've seen play itself out throughout history over and over again, which is, you know, cut out the people that are gonna maybe be a problem, that aren't like full-blown regime loyalists. Like any kind of independent thinking is not going to get rewarded in this administration, obviously, so he's hitting another purge. I don't know how many loyalists Tulsi has internally, but from Trump's perspective, this is just to solidify his ranks. This is a classic move. Similar to the Pam Bondi thing? No, that's not similar to Pam Bondi. So Pam Bondi was taken out in a similar manner to bovine bovino. On the Epstein stuff, it obviously got too it got too hot, and someone had to fall on a sword to open up a pressure valve, and Trump decided to lay the responsibility, lay the blame on Pam Bondi in that situation. Tulsi Gabbard, I think, is a different story. Tulsi Gabbard was I think, pushed aside because Trump is trying to make sure that the ranks are entirely loyal to what comes next. It is funny though. It's all women, I know. Trump has a vendetta against every woman he has ever hired for some reason is true. He literally came in and was doing girl boss fascism, and just all of the women are slowly but surely being fired. And when you think about it, his chief of staff is also a woman, and she has also regularly spoken out against Donald Trump. Susie Wiles might be coming up. If I'm Susie Wiles, I'm looking at the situation, I'm like, maybe it's time for a graceful exit. But yeah, I think there is a difference between Tulsi Gabbard and Pam Bondi. Like, Pam Bondi was unbelievably loyal to Donald Trump. Tulsi Gabbard is obviously also loyal to Donald Trump, but she definitely had her disagreements with the Trump administration on some of these issues. And I think that created an environment that was, at least an environment that was like unsustainable for Trump, because he needs maximum loyalty. Why does he not fire Kash Patel, for example? Kash Patel is maximum loyal to Donald Trump. Tulsi Gabbard is fairly loyal to Donald Trump as well. That's why she got the job. But there are areas where Tulsi has stepped out of line in a public manner, and I don't think Trump likes that at all. Trump is very much worried about stuff like that, especially if he's about to make a big move in Iran, especially if he's about to go back into war with Iran, or who knows if there's going to be a false flag attack or something to get the public on board with going to war with Iran or something, because it's like deeply unpopular currently. You would not want this is this is wee-woo conspiracy, but deeply unpopular war. It's cratering Trump's popularity even in his own base. It's like starting to chip away at his own base. People don't like that it's going on. People hate that it's costing them money, right? At a time when there's already an inflation issue that actually led Donald Trump to win the presidency. Donald Trump doesn't actually fix any of those problems. He turns around and exacerbates the issue. I don't think Donald Trump goes into war with Iran, straight up. There has to be something that is an inciting factor that causes Americans to reconsider whether or not this war with Iran is good or not. Totally could see a situation like that. But because he's a cultist, and because he's a cult leader, and because there's no real democratic process when it comes to determining whether or not the administration takes action on the foreign policy side, perhaps there is no need for a PSYOP or a false flag style incident. And regardless, it's clear Tulsi Gabbard's getting pushed out because there have been instances where he has humiliated Trump by opposing something that Trump wanted to advance. The Trump administration had a very coalition government approach to staffing, where the restrainer/Tucker wing got a bunch of jobs, Vance, Tulsi, Kent, Bridge, Colby, who are now seemingly just being ignored. Yeah, and not just being ignored. This raises the question of what exactly Tulsi Gabbard is doing these days. This was only a couple days ago when Matt Zaitlin asked this question. Sorry, not a couple days ago, a month or so ago. When Joe Kent initially resigned 2 months ago, this was an understandable question because Joe Kent was a part of the Tulsi Gabbard wing of like, we have to be a little bit more restrained. We shouldn't be going and waging war with, Middle Eastern countries. We've done this kind of military adventurism over and over again. It's been a failure, and we mustn't repeat those mistakes. Like that was part of the appeal for people like this, right? That appeal was what, allowed Donald Trump to present himself as a potential dud even. And now it's going away. It's going away because he doesn't give a because he doesn't need it. He does not need this base anymore. He doesn't need credibility in this space any longer, and he would much rather have people stay completely loyal to his military actions. All of them are Russian spies. Somebody Tracer here, one of my favorite chatters. You guys know it's ganging time, okay? Tracer here. If there's a foreign country that is currently intervening in American foreign policy or has direct control over American foreign policy, do you think it's Russia, or do you think it's maybe another foreign country?
And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties.
Seriously, saying, oh my God, this is Russiagate in 2026 is pretty crazy when Israel basically has its fist shoved deep inside of the asses of half of the people that are closest to Donald Trump, and also potentially Donald Trump, and not even potentially, definitely Donald Trump as well. If there's one country that is playing a formative role in American foreign policy, I don't think it's Russia. I think that country is Israel.
Wow. I'm also curious, Seth, about the most recent incident that drew criticism from both parties regarding her visit to this elections office in Georgia. She's obviously, as DNI, focused on coordinating overseas intelligence, but there she is in Fulton County at a domestic FBI.
Yeah, this was Tulsi being like, no, Mr. President, I am loyal. Please put me back in, coach. I mean, this was a side quest. It's also insane to send the director of national intelligence to American states to potentially signal that you're invested in doing some kind of interference in American elections is a wild thing to do, but that is where we are. By the way, Another fact to consider here, okay, as we are looking at this Tulsi Gabbard situation, is that the intelligence community and even Central Command, which is in the military side, have basically become a leaky faucet. It's actually interesting that the Trump administration doesn't talk about it as much, because this used to be a major problem in Trump 1, where you had a lot of people in pivotal roles listening in to these important meetings and then immediately going to the media and being like, this is insane, we have to put a stop to it, these guys don't know what they're doing. That's happening again right now. If you notice, Washington Post, with regular frequency, is engaging in coverage from the intelligence side where people that are either former heads of CIA or former heads of intelligence agencies or currently inside of the intelligence community giving long and extensive leaks to Washington Post, even Wall Street Journal, all these other outlets. And the reason why they're doing that is because they, too, are in opposition to what the Trump administration is doing. This is what you do when you are in a moment of crisis where you want America to be a domineering force. These guys are not anti-imperialists by any means, right? And neither is Tulsi Gabbard. But you're in a moment of crisis where you have an understanding of, like, what we should be doing and where we should potentially de-escalate or scale back. It's very clear that the Iran war is not going well, and the military understands that. The intelligence community understands that. They've given ample warning to the administration to not engage in this kind of action. And it's very clear that the admin is saying, we're going to side with Israel on this. We're going to side with the Israeli intelligence on this. We're going to bring in the Foundation for Defending the Democracy guys into the negotiations process. Like, they're doubling down on it. It's very clear. So in that situation, you either do high-profile resignations like Joe Kent did, or you get pushed out if you actually warn the administration perhaps too much, like in the case of Tulsi Gabbard. And those who remain behind leak all of these details and all of these assessments to the press with hopes that, this kind of stuff circulates in mainstream media, and if we had a competent anti-war opposition party, they would make a big fuss about this all the time, but they currently are not, because the opposition party is the Democratic Party, which is a feckless and inept and also pro-war party broadly.
All of a sudden, we find out that Witkoff and Rubio are negotiating a secret side deal with Iran. What kind of bull is this? They're going to sound tough in public and then have a side deal that lets Iran get away with everything? That's outrageous. If Taco Trump is already folding, the American public should know about it. No side deal.
There are definitely a lot of Democrats out there who are frustrated with what's going on, even the likes of, like, Ruben Gallego, right? Like, there are some who are upset with the way that Trump is moving. But broadly speaking, because a lot of the Democrats are also Israel first, the National Party's outlook on here is also Israel first, so there's always enough votes to continue supporting Israel's ambitions here, because that's what this is. This war with Iran is not being waged for American interests, it's being waged for Israel's interests. And we're in an impasse here. We're at a moment where America's, like, broader goals of being a domineering force and being the hegemonic superpower are directly at odds with Israel's regional ambitions of destroying Iran. So there are obviously people who want to continue the American empire, who see that as a big problem, and they keep bringing this up to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump keeps telling him to scoff and stay the course on Israel. Mark Ames also has a similar attitude here, judging by, John Hudson's new coverage, right? John Hudson delivered this scathing speech yesterday. The U.S. has depleted much of its inventory of advanced missile defense interceptors after expending far more high-end munitions defending Israel than Israeli forces use themselves. There's a reason why, like, a lot of the CSIS guys are freaking out, and they're just, like, constantly telling whoever will listen in the media that, like, our stockpiles have diminished. All of our peer and near-peer adversary standoff munitions that we develop, that we stockpile, that take years and years and potentially decades to develop, to compile are gone. We expended it against Iran, and part of the reason why we did that is because we did not establish full-blown air superiority over the Iranian airspace. It was contested, so we had to use these standoff munitions from afar. We had to lob these missiles over and over again from afar, and we depleted our stockpile, so we cannot do anything against Russia if there was ever, an imminent threat, and we cannot do anything against China if there was ever an imminent threat. So that's a huge problem for a lot of the people on the military side who want to maintain American force projection capabilities, right? So even from their perspective, this has been a wash. But what's unique is I think there are more people, maybe due to the incompetence of this administration, there are more people who are naysayers, who are willing to actually resign or willing to make a big fuss about it at higher levels than the Biden administration. Mark Ames has a similar assessment here. It says, U.S. officials weaken in WAPO how badly Israel is weakening the empire shows growing resentment, yet Israel remains confident that there's no sacrifice Washington won't make for Tel Aviv's benefit, up to and including national suicide. And so far, Israel's been proven right. This is the death of American empire. Israel is accelerating the death of American empire. J.D. Pondon is real. And maybe even J.D. Pon Bibi is real. J.D. Pon Yahoo, the big Yahoo himself, has forced the hand of the current American administration into a double suicide pact. Obviously, there are, intelligent people who I do not align with at all ideologically, because I don't want the American empire to be this domineering force. I think that's very dangerous and deadly and not exactly beneficial for nations in the periphery, the people that live in those countries, and it's certainly not beneficial for the American working class either. But these guys want that to continue. They benefit from it, and they're realizing that Israel has accelerated the demise of this process.
Political interference, the backdrop, of course, President Trump's claims about the 2020 election and there being fraud in Georgia. And then,
this is also, incredible scoop from John. This is a really blistering blind quote. Israel is not capable of fighting and winning wars on its own. But nobody actually knows this because they never see the back end, said a second administration official. There is a tremendous amount of resentment within the State Department right now against Israel. Obviously, there's always been like the two different, the two different schools of thought within the State Department, and the CIA. The people who are like, Israel's not a good ally for understandable reasons, and then the people who are like, shut the fuck up, and Israel high, how dare you say that? It's the most important nation on the planet. And over again, the people that have said, Israel high, Israel's the most important nation on the planet, or have literally served in the IDF, for example, like Amos Hochstein, or people who are ultra-Zionists, like Brett McGurk, for example, have won that conversation, have told successfully every single other naysayer within the State Department to shut the fuck up. The Trump administration is not as competent as keeping the ranks tight as the competent bureaucrats within the Democratic administration. So you have, and also Trump is engaging in a lot more risky behavior that does actually stress test American capabilities here. And therefore, you're going to hear more and more people come out anonymously with these sorts of quotes.
Beyond that, there were these conflicting explanations about why specifically the DNI would even be there. I mean, what does that tell you about her time as DNI and the ways in which her relationship with the president evolved into her work?
Yeah, I think that, the DNI gathered was in search of a mission that was of value to the president. And, there was this kind of joke.
Like, they're talking about what she was doing in Georgia, okay? I mean, that's dangerous and it's devastating, but that's not the reason why she's out. I don't think she had a big issue with, manipulating American elections as the director of national intelligence. No, the reason why she got pushed out is because she found herself at odds with the administration's overarching goals in Iran. And maybe even, if I'm being real spicy with it, maybe she didn't like what the administration was potentially planning. I can totally see that.
Guys, I've just been handed this, I can read from you. This is her resignation note that we've obtained from Tulsi Gabbard. Dear Mr. President, I am deeply grateful for the trust you placed in me and for the opportunity to lead the Office of the Director of National Intelligence for the last year and a half. Unfortunately, I must submit my resignation effective June 30th, 2026. My husband, Abraham, has recently been diagnosed with an extremely rare form of bone cancer. She writes, he faces major challenges in the coming weeks and months. At this time, I must step away from public service to be by his side and fully support him through this battle. Abraham has been my rock throughout our 11 years of marriage.
Yeah, I don't think this is the reason why she resigned, okay? No one believes that, right? No, I hope no one can believe that like, is the real reason. I'm fairly certain she could continue doing her job. I'm not saying she's, like, faking that he has bone cancer or whatever. I'm just saying that she's using that as a way to, like, exit gracefully, when in fact it's fairly certain that Donnie Boy asked her. I have a very different approach, I think, than many Democrats do, certainly on this issue. I think this is good. I think this summit so far has been very good. It's been good for a couple different reasons. One, a lot of Fox News people finally went to China and got to experience, like, regular, everyday Chinese experiences. Showing that to boomers is probably really good, because boomers think China is a peasant country. Obviously, every single person in my community has a very different attitude, because I literally went to China. I talk about China quite a bit. I talk about Chinese development quite a bit. So you've actually seen it personally when you watch me do live streams in China, right? In Beijing, in Shanghai, in Chongqing, in Chengdu, and also in Hong Kong. But most Americans think China is run by an agrarian peasant society that is still working at the rice paddy, that is backwards, that's like not dissimilar to the DPRK, and our understanding of DPRK is probably also different than what the DPRK looks like as well. Obviously, I'm not saying it's fantastic, but, like, Americans are very sheltered when it comes to the way that they learn about our foreign adversaries. So when you have Brett Baer on Fox News in prime time going up to, like, Chinese stores and being like, look at this is a robot serving me a sausage, a lot of boomers are going to be like, oh my God, they are so goddamn advanced.
Inside. This is the first of its kind for this kind of interaction. If you want to order something, hello, can I get a sausage, please?
Okay. Calcon, 8.8 yuan.
This is, oh baby. Yeah, also there's a very funny clip of Brett Baer has been the hero of this trip, okay? It's been very funny watching him go through the motions of, like, everyday Chinese existence. It's really funny. While Fox is complaining they got a ticket for illegal parking, this is what his team is doing. Beijing residents spotted this and uploaded to Douyin. Fox News Brett Baer filming in the middle of busy traffic. By the way, that is insanely dangerous. Even fucking walking on regular sidewalks without paying attention to scooters whizzing by is dangerous. And this motherfucker's on the bike lane. I don't even know. This is probably one of the most dangerous things Brett Baer has done in his career. And I'm telling you, as someone who is there, even walking on the sidewalk without paying attention to the electric scooters that are unbelievably silent, whizzing past you at like 30 miles an hour, the fact that he's walking in the middle of the goddamn bike lane is insane to me, okay? Those mopeds, they're going to take him out. An 85-year-old Chinese auntie is going to kill Brett Baer if he keeps this shit up. Brett Baer also complained about getting a ticket. They complained about flock cameras. Well, the Chinese version of flock cameras. That's also very funny. A couple things that I obviously also experienced was, like, that there is definitely a lot of surveillance that's in your face in Beijing, especially. Definitely in a lot of major Chinese cities as well, but certainly in Beijing, there's an environment of tension. Beijing is a very, I would say, uptight city in comparison to many of the other Chinese cities that I experienced. Shanghai is very Western-facing. If you're really into, like a Western cosmopolitan, there's something for everybody in China. This is so vast, it's so large, and there are are so many significant cultural differences from city to city. If you like Western-style cities, you will love Shanghai. That was, Austin's favorite. Or Hong Kong as well, if you like, Hong Kong cinema, for example. I liked Chongqing and Chengdu the most. Probably Chengdu was my favorite because there are very different, very distinct cultural attitudes in these different cities. And I think Chongqing and Chengdu were real Chinese cities as opposed to Beijing is basically like Washington, D.C. in many respects. Very uptight, very serious. And there is definitely an environment of tension where you're like, I don't want to step, I don't want to do something wrong here. And I didn't feel that way in Chongqing or Chengdu at all. Nah, Beijing is a really real city. No, it is a really real city, but it's also, it's the heart, right? Perhaps I didn't get a good shake of Beijing as well because it was the first city that we were in. Maybe we were tense for that reason, but that was my experience with Beijing. It's just very uptight, very corporate, or very, not even corporate necessarily, but just very party-centric, if that makes sense. Now, there's a distinction here. American surveillance is covert. Chinese surveillance, on the other hand, is overt. Chinese surveillance is in your face. American surveillance is not so much in your face, with the exception of flock cameras and things like that. I find that very interesting, okay? Obviously, Brett Baer is, America literally does already law. You can get a ticket in the mall in multiple cities due to automated cameras, yeah. Fox News crew in Beijing got ticketed by CCTV surveillance cameras after illegally parking for just 2 minutes. I have a lot of opinions on this. Because on the one hand, the overt surveillance that's constantly in your face in Beijing especially is an interesting culture shock for many Americans, and yet the things that they're complaining about here are things that Fox News would absolutely want. Fox News viewers would actually want here American style. And in some respects, it already exists in the United States of America. You think the Fox News boomers don't want a permanent surveillance state to ensure that every single criminal is instantly booked and ticketed and actually go to prison? What are you talking about? You're mad that they have Insta cameras and Insta ticketing options. Okay, you're telling the boomers the wrong lesson. Because if you were an American boomer and you didn't have these racialized hang-ups because they're doing it Chinese style and therefore scary, you would look at this and go, wait, what the f*** are you talking about? The cities are clean, there's no homelessness, there's no visible crime at all. Great, that's what I want, that's utopian. From the perspective of the white suburban boomers, right? They literally want that. So it's really funny when these guys look at what China is doing, when it's these are things that I'm critical of China, whereas I think it's a little bit too strict. The social engineering that takes place in China is far too strict for my taste. I'm a social libertarian in many respects as a Westerner, right? This is the culture that I grew up in. This is the opinions that I have. But those boomers, they're treatlerites in every respect. They would love this. They would love the constant presence of surveillance and what that does to crime rates in America, right? The difference, of course, is we have constant surveillance, and yet it is not overt, but covert. We have flock cameras. We have probably a similar level of CCTV density in major cities in the United States of America. We certainly do in places like London, for example. But the per capita CCTV density is probably fairly high in the United States of America as well. I don't know the exact numbers. I wouldn't be surprised if it is, though, and especially with the new invention of flock cameras and Pegasus Palantir software and AI surveillance. We are doing Chinese-style surveillance. We're doing Chinese-style surveillance here in the United States of America already.
Our driver parked illegally for 2 minutes, and he got a message on his phone that he got a ticket for about $40 US because they saw it on the camera. Now, there are real questions what the CCP's role is about citizen tracking and social scoring. They say it's to make everybody...
Dog, you're there. Stop with the social scoring. You know it doesn't exist, man. Jesus Christ, go talk to any Chinese person, please. Chinese people make jokes about social credit on Chinese social media to make jokes about how stupid Americans are, by the way. They'll literally post that one wall of shame that they have where people crosswalk or people jaywalk on a crosswalk, and it just poop, immediately takes a photo of you and puts it on the wall of shame. They literally post that on Douyin and to be like, see, this is the social credit wall that Americans think is, social credit. Also, we unironically do have social credit. They don't. We do. That's what's so funny about it. We're like, oh, imagine having a social credit system. How dystopian. We have it. They don't even have it. Every time there's like a regional pilot program that takes place in a country with 1.4 billion people, okay, and then the federal government's like, we don't like this, nix this program. That's literally what happened with the social credit system. It was for businesses in a certain area. It was a social credit system for specifically businesses in one fucking region. It never got implemented at the federal level, and Americans still talk about it endlessly. If you want actually a federal system that is restrictive and Americans would probably look at as dystopian, look at the HUCO system. That's one area that needs reform, in my opinion. It was very restrictive at the time, but maybe even beneficial for development. I don't know. And the current system, the current HUCO system is just more so about like region locking you for social benefits that you get. I mean, you just said there was a ton of surveillance. Yeah, no, I know. I'm saying it made me uncomfortable, but boomers would probably love that. And boomers probably don't even recognize we have that. It makes me uncomfortable in America, too. HUCO system is being reformed. A lot of Western leftists don't understand the changes that have been made to it in the past decade. No, I know.
You feel safe. These cameras are watching every minute. They're everywhere. And while they're watching us here in China, we hope you continue to watch. Special report from Beijing.
I said, it's so cool we have SWAT cameras and no high-speed rail or interest in developing our infrastructure. We also literally do have this exact same system. Like I said, we have the SWAT cameras. We have mass surveillance, like always on, constant mass surveillance and AI tracking on top of that in the United States of America. This was an incredible moment for me, by the way. Stephen Chung, my favorite Trump loyalist. My favorite character from the Trump regime is Stephen Chung. He is so perfectly shaped. I can't even say he's rotund because he's more so angular, if that makes sense. I love him. I love him so much. And I think you guys know this. I've talked about it quite a bit. This is Trump's media guy, obviously. He's the White House comms director. And I think he is an incredible person. He is so perfect. He is the most perfectly shaped guy of all time. Yes, he is Flats the Flounder. He is so Flats the Flounder shaped, and I love that. I personally love that, and I'm not alone in that love. Look at Xi Jinping's face. He's like admiring Stephen Chung's size. He's admiring the fact that Stephen Chung is a human being. He is admiring him. Like, look, he's like, how can a human being shape himself like this? I personally think if I had power, I would probably hire Yakuza bosses like this. I would probably find myself hiring people that just look so comical, you know, like henchmen coded for really weird positions too. In the same way that Donald Trump has. He says, what have they been feeding you, comrade? You got it, boss. Physiognomy. It's incredible. He is incredible. I'm not even joking about this. Like, I don't need to joke about this. I'm being so sincere. He is incredible. He is so perfect in every way. Maybe my worst take. I think this frustrates people when I say, like, how much I love Stephen Chung, but he is the top chud because he's just so chud-shaped as well. He is the peak hench build. Oh, God, I wish I knew more people like that. I wish I had more people like that in my life. Okay? Yeah, you don't wake up looking like this. It's dedication. Like, he is dedicated to the craft. So, yeah, echoes of when Mao met Kissinger's tall wife. No, literally, that's what I was thinking, too. Look, there's a very famous moment where Mao goes, oh, my God, your wife is so tall. Look at his face. Wait, it's coming. Watch this. What? And remember, Mao is fairly tall. He's like 6'1", fairly tall guy. And he is in awe. He's like, what the f-? He goes, that's your wife? And Henry's like, yeah, that's my tallest wife, man. That is literally what happened here, okay? That is what happened here. It's the same. Let's get back to this now.
Ice-shaped handshake between superpowers. Chinese President Xi welcoming President Trump back to China for the first time in nearly a decade. Rolling out the red carpet. Chinese children there to greet Trump. After the pomp, Trump heaping praise on Xi.
You're a great leader. Sometimes people don't like me saying it, but I say it anyway because it's true.
Sitting with their...
That was such an awesome moment. When I heard that, I couldn't believe it. Many people, I always say China is beautiful. A lot of people don't like it, but I say it anyway. I shouldn't say it, but it's true. I shouldn't say it, but it's true.
Delegations at an expansive negotiating table.
April, Xi saying they should be partners, not adversaries, that their common interests outweigh their differences. But the pleasantries are stark contrast to the challenges facing this critical relationship. In their over 2-hour meeting, Xi delivering a stark warning to Trump about Taiwan, which Beijing claims as its own territory. According to China's state media, Xi telling Trump if the issue is handled poorly, the two countries will collide, or even clash. Trump tight-lipped.
How will you talk, sir?
Dude, by the way, it has been an unbelievable pleasure seeing Trump forced into submission and seeing him act like a normal politician. You rarely ever get to see it. Even with Putin, you don't get to see him behave like a real politician. He's like a child. I mean, he's like a child all the time, but he's like a bad child that is actually forced to behave like a good child for once. You know what I'm talking about? I'm sure you have like some relatives who are very spoiled or something, you know what I mean? And they in an unexpected moment, because they want to have ice cream or like a toy, they're told you have to behave for the duration of this event, and then they just sit quietly, very stiff, more stiff than they've ever been, and they wait like an obedient puppy for the treat, right? And that's what's going on here with Donald Trump. It's been a phenomenal thing to observe from afar. He was so good. You know how people say, oh, Trump became presidential in this moment or that moment when he bombed Afghanistan, he became presidential, whatever. This was one of the few instances where he was forced to behave like a president. I've never seen anything like it. With Ukraine, he certainly isn't presidential. With Vladimir Putin, he is not presidential. He reduces himself with Vladimir Putin to a certain degree where it's like humiliating. This is perfect. It was the perfect amount. I could not believe it. I've never seen Trump like this before. I was looking back in his 2017 visit to see if there was like similarities, but he was a lot different back then overall. This is the only time where I've seen him not up. It's genuinely shocking. After 10 years of Trump madness, to watch him sit and stand next to a global force where he has to straight up act right. By the way, they know how to gas him, okay? The song YMCA will be played at the state banquet for the Trump visit. They know how to gas him so good. The children, the little kids that were waving the American flags in tennis race. First of all, this is a very like Eastern thing, like an Eastern country thing. For those of you who don't know, look, I grew up in Turkey. You know, children are the future is like a very important part of the whole ordeal where we have like an International Children's Day. So in America, there's like a very weird, gross association with like involving children in politics in this way. I didn't grow up in that environment, in that culture at all. So like it might come across as weird for a lot of Americans when they see like little kids waving flags. But like, so the attitude in many parts of the world, not in the West for the most part, but in many parts of the world, is this idea that like children are the future and that children don't have the same violent worldview, the worldview born out of conflict. So like the idea is that the next generation, our children, are going to merge the world. That they all their perspective is an internationalist one automatically. The better way to look at it is that children haven't been destroyed by capitalist indoctrination and a theory of conflict, even offensive realism, that we've learned to implement and develop and believe. But yeah, Trump loved this. Okay, they're waving the American flag and the Chinese flag, and they're doing it in unison. They're organized. Look at him. He loves it. He loves it. Which, by the way, for the record, not only is there's two different Chinese cultural forces at play here. One, children of the future. They have hope for a better tomorrow. This is not just a Chinese attitude either. I've definitely grown up in this environment in Turkey as well. But the other one is mutual prosperity. The concept of like mutual understanding, wanting to create an environment of peace, charting a more peaceful path forward through diplomacy. This is not just a Chinese attitude, but it's certainly one that is like very important in China as well. America used to do this as well to a certain degree with other countries. That's why we have like sister cities. We have sister cities and like mutual, like an environment of mutual understanding and trying to develop like some kind of cultural cross promotion and collaboration. So that's what this is, right? And the Chinese certainly want that, right? This is a thing that I definitely saw in China personally. It's something that many other countries have always done. I do think that the world has, in the accelerated neoliberal, unipolar American hegemony, the world has grown dark, I would say. Like, this was definitely a thing even in the Cold War, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and post-90s, in the aftermath of the Cold War. I think this attitude started shifting, where we lost sight of an internationalist framework, where in many respects everything was global, but also there was a much more pessimistic attitude about, a much more cynical attitude about mutual understanding and trying to chart a more peaceful path forward. The Chinese never gave up on that, okay? So this is like old world mentality, but in some respects, this was the fundamental principle of the West as well. This was like Western liberalism, was all about, even if they didn't fully subscribe to it, or even if they were insincere in their advancement of this kind of idea, this notion is literally what the Western world was developed around. And it worked. Okay, this was unbelievably successful. It was so successful, this as well, was so successful, Trump brought it up in the first meeting that they had, where he's like, the kids, they were so wonderful. Obviously, we're all making jokes, because, he's an Epstein affiliate. But it did actually work in buttering Trump up. And he said he had a bunch of different moments in the Beijing summit so far that were very interesting. I will get to them, talking about, Chinese food, for example. There's like funny moments as well. You're wondering why J.D. Vance is not there. When J.D. Vance said, why should we worry about China? They're a nation of peasants. Why would we worry about a backwater nation of peasants? Let me tell you, I was in China right after he said that. That was an incredibly step thing to say about China. That was genuinely one of the worst things J.D. Vance could have said. I mean, they're